The story opens with a wound that runs deeper than money, because when someone leaves you during your lowest moment, it isn't just abandonment. It's a declaration that you were never loved for who you were, only for what you could provide. Key point 1 explores that initial heartbreak, where the man stands in the ruins of a relationship he once believed was unbreakable. When his wife walked out, she didn't just take her belongings. She took the certainty he once carried about his worth. He replayed her final words again and again, the ones that hit like a blade. "I can't live like this. You'll never be enough for me." Those words weren't spoken in anger. They were spoken with cold, calculated clarity, which made them hurt even more. At first, he tried to convince her to stay. He reminded her of the promises they made, the vows of standing together through thick and thin, but she wasn't listening. Her eyes didn't show frustration or sadness, they showed something worse, disappointment mixed with superiority. In her mind, she had already moved on. She had already pictured a life with someone richer, more stable. Someone who could give her everything she believed she deserved without waiting for him to rise. That was the day he realized she never believed in him at all. The breakup was not a dramatic fight. It was the quiet kind, where a person emotionally leaves long before they physically walk out the door. When she packed her bags, each item she folded into her suitcase felt like a chapter closing. He watched from the hallway, feeling powerless, as if the life he'd built was slipping from his hands, and he couldn't grab onto it fast enough. The silence in the house was the worst part. It hit him immediately after she left, a suffocating stillness that made every room echo with memories of laughter that had turned into arguments, and arguments that had turned into indifference. In the days that followed, he felt the sting of shame. Not only was he heartbroken, he was humiliated. Friends who once knew them as a perfect couple heard whispers of her leaving because he was broke. Relatives made subtle remarks, implying he wasn't capable enough. Even strangers who didn't know him judged him through her story, because she made sure people understood her reason for leaving was justified. She painted him as a failure who couldn't provide, and that hurt more than anything else. But beneath that pain was something stronger, a small flame of resentment mixed with determination. The betrayal became the fire that forced him to confront his life and rebuild. Losing her wasn't just the end of a relationship. It became the moment he looked in the mirror and realized that no one was coming to save him. The only person who could rewrite his story was himself, and while the heartbreak nearly broke him, it also planted the seed for a future she never imagined he could create. After she left, the world didn't suddenly become kind. In fact, it felt harsher than before. He woke up every morning to the same broken routine, a small apartment that felt too quiet, bills stacked on the table, and a haunting feeling that life had cornered him. But somewhere in that silence, he realized he had two choices: drown in self-pity or rebuild himself from the ground up. That realization didn't come with inspiration or dramatic music. It came in the middle of the night when he sat alone, feeling the weight of his failure pressing on his chest. He finally understood that no one was going to hand him success, and no one was going to love him unconditionally until he learned to love and believe in himself first. The journey that followed wasn't glamorous. He didn't suddenly wake up with motivation every day. Some mornings felt like dragging a heavy chain. But he forced himself to move. He picked up extra shifts, took on jobs that bruised his pride, and worked hours that left him exhausted. The world didn't applaud him. In fact, most people didn't even notice. But he kept going, choosing discipline over comfort. Every paycheck, no matter how small, became a symbol of his ability to rebuild. At night, instead of collapsing into bed defeated, he studied. He learned new skills: consumed books on business and mindset, and started understanding things he once ignored. His mind sharpened day by day, and slowly a vision of a different future began forming. There were setbacks, many of them. Deals fell apart, attempts failed, and sometimes he questioned whether the effort was worth it. But each failure taught him something his old life never did. He learned patience, he learned resilience, he learned how to stand up without expecting anyone to hold his hand. And through that process, something inside him shifted. The man who once begged someone to stay began building a life where he didn't need approval to feel valuable. His confidence grew, not because people praised him, but because he knew exactly how much pain he had endured and how much he had overcome. As he gained experience, opportunities started opening, small ones at first, a better job offer, a partnership, a side business that began showing promise. He poured everything into these chances, treating each step as if it were the foundation of the rest of his life. He wasn't chasing wealth to prove his ex-wife wrong anymore. He was chasing a future where he could stand proud when he looked in the mirror. Slowly, the long nights turned into productive days, the income grew, the failures lessened, the wins became more frequent. People around him noticed his transformation, even if he didn't. His posture changed. His tone became steadier. His goals became clearer, and for the first time he felt in control of his destiny. What fueled him in the beginning was pain, but what kept him going was purpose. The journey of reinvention wasn't about revenge. It was about becoming the strongest version of himself. And step by step, he built the life that would one day make the world gasp, including the very woman who once walked away thinking he would never rise. Success didn't arrive with an explosion of glory. It arrived quietly, like a sunrise spreading across the horizon, slowly revealing how far he had come. One day he woke up and realized he wasn't surviving anymore, he was building. His business, once just an idea in the corner of a dimly lit apartment, had begun to grow into something real. Money started flowing in steadily, clients began trusting him, and people who once dismissed him suddenly wanted his time. He wasn't the man struggling to pay rent anymore. He was becoming someone who controlled his own future. Yet the most remarkable part wasn't the money, it was the confidence that came with every milestone. For the first time in years, he felt like he wasn't running from his past, but running toward his potential. As his income increased, so did his vision. He began making smarter investments, studying markets, surrounding himself with people who challenged him to think bigger. Little by little, the world that once felt too heavy to carry began opening its doors. He bought his first car, modest but fully paid for. Then came an office space, a small team, and a clear plan for scaling his business. What had started out of desperation transformed into a passion that fueled him every day. People saw the results, but they didn't see the sacrifices, the nights he slept on the office couch, the meals he skipped to save money, the weekends he traded for work. He knew what it took to get here, and that made every victory taste sweeter. Eventually, the numbers grew beyond what he ever imagined. Not doing okay, money, real wealth. The kind of wealth that takes years of discipline, strategy, and grit to build. He bought land, invested in properties, and expanded his business into multiple streams of income. He wasn't trying to become rich out of revenge anymore. He was wealthy because he had refused to quit when everything inside him begged him to stop. And with that success came a new phase of life, peace. He could finally breathe without fear of losing everything. He could finally enjoy what he had built without feeling guilty. The mansion wasn't purchased to impress anyone. It was a quiet celebration of survival. When he toured the property for the first time, walking through gigantic halls, marble floors, and glass walls overlooking acres of green, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: gratitude. This house wasn't a symbol of money, it was a symbol of everything he had overcome. Every room reminded him that he rose from a life where even paying bills felt impossible. Now he had space, comfort, a view of the world from a height he once believed he would never reach. Yet, despite all the luxury, he remained grounded. He didn't let wealth rewrite his character. He remembered where he came from, and that memory kept him humble. He didn't brag. He didn't seek validation. He didn't feel the need to announce his success to the people who once doubted him. He lived quietly, privately, choosing peace over attention. And that is exactly why the moment would later hit so hard. The moment when the past he had left behind appeared again at his gate, completely unprepared for the man he had become. The day she returned wasn't marked by any special occasion. It was just an ordinary afternoon, the kind where he usually sat in his home office, reviewing plans and signing documents, surrounded by a calm he had worked years to earn. But then came the unexpected buzzing at the mansion gate, a sound that rarely meant anything emotional. Most visitors were scheduled, professional, predictable. But the moment he glanced at the security monitor, time itself froze. Standing outside, looking small against the massive iron gate, was the woman who once shattered him so effortlessly. His ex-wife, the same woman who walked out when he was broken, who said he'd never become anything, who left without even turning back. And now she was here, staring up at the mansion she never believed he could own. She looked different, not physically, but emotionally. There was no arrogance in her posture, no confidence in her eyes. Instead, there was uncertainty, hesitation, and something he had never seen in her before: regret. She clutched her bag nervously, glancing at the camera, as if hoping he would open the gate quickly, so she wouldn't have to stand with her guilt visible on her face. For a moment he didn't react. He simply stared at the screen, trying to understand how the past had suddenly walked back into his new world. His mind went back to the night she left, her cold words, her confident exit, her belief that she was upgrading her life by abandoning him. And now, after all these years, she had returned to the very man she once considered not enough. He didn't press the gate button immediately. Instead, he took a deep breath, allowing the shock to settle. He had imagined what he would feel if he ever saw her again, and the emotions he anticipated, anger, bitterness, pain, didn't come. Instead, he felt nothing, just a steady calmness that only comes from healing. Still, curiosity drew him to the door. When he finally stepped outside, walking down the long driveway, she saw him approaching and straightened up quickly, wearing a smile that was too forced to be genuine. "You look different," she said, her voice shaky, but he could hear the real message behind her words. "You look successful. You look like everything I thought you could never become." She tried to make conversation, acting as if they were lost friends. She talked about missing him, about realizing her mistakes, about wanting to reconnect because she still cared. But her eyes betrayed her. They weren't filled with love, they were filled with calculation. She had seen his life online, the business articles, the mansion photos circulating, the quiet success he never bragged about. And now she wanted to return, hoping the door she slammed years ago would magically open for her again. What she didn't expect was his silence. He didn't argue. He didn't remind her of what she had done. He didn't seek validation. His calmness made her nervous. And as she stood there trying to resurrect a bond she had destroyed, she slowly realized something devastating. The man she once left behind had healed far beyond her reach. She had come back for another chance, but the version of him she abandoned no longer existed. The moment of confrontation wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't filled with shouting or revengeful insults. Instead, it unfolded with a quiet strength that shook her far more than any angry reaction ever could. As she stood at the gate, searching his face for some sign of the man she once knew, the man who begged her to stay, the man who apologized for problems he didn't create, the man who felt small. Under the weight of her judgment, she found none of him there. He looked at her with a calmness she couldn't decipher, a kind of emotional stability that made her feel like a stranger in his presence. And that calmness terrified her. He finally asked her why she had come. For a moment she froze because there was no version of the truth that made her look good. She stumbled through excuses, talking about how she had made mistakes, how life hadn't turned out the way she expected, how she had been going through a confusing time when she left him. But her voice cracked on the edges, revealing the real truth she didn't dare to say directly. She had expected him to fail without her, and instead, he had risen so far above what she thought possible that she barely recognized the life he now lived. The reality of her own choices had come crashing down on her. He listened without interrupting, and the longer he remained silent, the more frantic she became. She talked about missing him, about wanting to reconnect, about hoping they could start over. But every word sounded rehearsed, shallow, and driven by regret rather than love. She was not here because she suddenly realized he was her soulmate. She was here because she realized the future she gambled on didn't exist, and the one she abandoned had become something magnificent. Deep down, she had hoped that when she returned, he would still be emotionally attached, still wounded, still longing for her. But instead, she met a man who had grown past her shadow completely. When he finally spoke, he didn't raise his voice. He simply told her the truth she wasn't prepared to hear. He explained that her leaving had hurt him deeply, but it also set him free. It forced him to rebuild his life without needing validation from anyone. He said he was no longer the man she walked away from, not because of the money, not because of the mansion, but because he had learned to respect himself. And with that self-respect came a clarity she could never manipulate again. She looked at him with wide, trembling eyes as she realized the door she had once slammed shut could not be reopened. Not because he wanted revenge, but because he understood the value of peace and refused to let anyone disturb it again. She wasn't facing the broken version of him. She was facing the healed version who had no space left for the person who abandoned him. And when he turned away, leaving her standing at the gate of the life she willingly walked out of, she finally understood the harsh truth. Sometimes life gives you a second chance, but not with the same person. He chose closure, not revenge. Freedom, not bitterness. And in that peaceful goodbye, he proved that the greatest triumph is not wealth. It's the strength to walk forward without looking back.